Well, man, it's the winter time, and so I'm bundled up. So pardon my staying so warm, but wanted to pass hopefully also a warm spirit on to you as well. Well, I wanted to go through the chapters 10 through 15 of the Powers Administration book and just highlight some of the things that he's got there in those 6 chapters to help us with understanding how to lead a church effectively and wisely. So he starts off in chapter 10. I'll get there just quickly. Sharing and working on planning your special events. And in this chapter, he's just giving helpful understanding and some wise counsel about weddings, funerals, and then even evangelistic um, ministries that are conducted on a special events basis. And so this is just a very helpful chapter in the things that are said in each of those different categories. But as he closes out saying, just plan, plan, plan. You can't plan too much. You can't just always be planning and not take action. It's like aiming, 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 never firing. But the fact that you want to do your careful work as far as planning and precluding as many unnecessary hurdles or things that could stop the work from having the impact that you're praying that it will have. Chapter 11, Church Publications. The second sentence, there is a direct relationship between how a congregation thinks and feels about its life and the content and quality of its published materials. That's powerful. And understand that wisdom, it breeds a self-image and, and to that extent an atmosphere of faith and quality as to carrying out God's work. And always the bottom line is obedience to the Lord, but definitely encouraging enthusiasm and a positive self-image is always going to help towards believing God for more in that sense. So looking at your church bulletins and what he says on page 210 about basic information, number 4, if you want to do outreach, make sure you cover these pieces of information on materials you'll hand out to prospective attenders to your church and lost people that you're trying to reach and build bridges to for Christ. Page 211, number 8, review annually the effectiveness of church publications. And then on page 212, ideals to enhance your publications. All of those are very, very helpful, very practical. So do work through that. And then the last point, number 12 on 213, proofread, proofread, proofread. Working with students online that I've done over the years, a lot of times we just do things and we don't go back and do a second reading of it. And there's so many mistakes that you're going to make. All of us are going to make those mistakes, and you've got to proofread. And like he says, do it 3 times, especially regarding your publications, because there's going to be things there that you've missed. And even going over to first time proofreading, you still miss some things that you want to be sharp on it by going those extra efforts of proofreading. So that's very good. Chapter 12, I just want to say all the things that he points out, we're going to touch on a few of those real quickly, but I would encourage you to consider contracting with Rod Wiltrout that retired from our state convention last year. He's been in our association several times conducting financial and legal type topics of legal matters affecting our churches. But Rod offers his services to a local church for $200 a year, and you have access to him all the time. I say all the time. I think his hours are actually, since he's retired, he set it up so he can maintain some kind of sense of retirement, but it's 9 to 2, Monday through Thursday, I think, but also available through email. And then through that, you get all of his resources, personal consultation. I just want to say, regarding these things that will be brought out in chapter 12, I think that would be a worthy consideration, because as Caldwell, in writing this chapter, things are changing all the time as far as legal updates and the government changing things that are affecting nonprofits, and that means churches. And they're also the fact that our tax base is going down in various locations. They look for extra means of income for taxes, and local officials not trying to, cheat churches at all, but will try to then get taxation revenues from churches in ways that they hadn't before. And so to be up to date, you don't have the time to do all that, but that's what Rod Wiltrout does, and he'll be that kind of a help to you. So I just want to make that recommendation to consider that and talk about that with your leaders. For $200 a year, I know it's a cost, but it can be well worth so many times more than that to your church, what Rod's counsel and working with you can mean. He covers incorporation, the role of trustees, what a charter, bylaws, and minutes, their function in the church on 222. He talks about liabilities, the need for workman's compensation matters on church employees. All this is so practical and so helpful. State, local taxes, he goes into that in this chapter. What Congress is doing and how, again, that's impacting our churches. It mentions about estate planning. Our California Baptist Foundation can assist with that. I'm pretty sure they still send men out to do that as a service in our churches free of charge. And so that would be well worth your lining up that type of instruction and encouragement to your members, because as people prepare their wills, definitely they can consider including the church as a part of the recipient of the different revenues that they have received through God's blessings, that they want to invest in God's kingdom's business, and certainly your church is one of those opportunities for them to invest in the Lord's work. So these things that are talked about are all very helpful, and again, I think it's well worth the consideration of having Rod's sustained help. Ethical Standards for Ministers is a neat chapter by this Judy Stamey. This closing two paragraphs of 231, she says, this is not always an easy thing to do, since the development of ethics or values begins so early in life. When a person becomes a believer, many of his or her values have already taken shape. This is the primary reason that helping a church to determine what the members value becomes a significant challenge. One of the church's responsibilities is to provide education that will help members grow spiritually, which should include helping them to determine what they value, what their standards are, and what guides them in making daily decisions. Radical changes may have to take place in the life of a new believer because of their relationship with Jesus, yet many of the changes related to attitudes, values, and knowing how to do the right thing may not be radical at all, but will need to be modified to be in keeping with biblical principles. That's what discipleship is. But also, again, as a church, discovering your values like we looked at in Malfer's work as a part of this course. So all that helps to shape an uprightness, a righteousness in the lives of our members. So this is very helpful in all the things that are, again, said here about ethics. The process of writing an ethical statement she addresses in 236 and 7. You might want to look up, I didn't pull it out. Here it is. Jonathan Edwards' Resolutions. It's a neat little book. You can order it online from Amazon or wherever. But this shares what his ethical statements were, his values, his life maxims, and it's a very interesting read. The subtitle is "And Advice to Young Converts." But Jonathan Edwards, that great mind, that, if my memory is right, became president, asked to be president at Yale, or was Princeton, and then he dies within 2 months of taking up the presidency of the school back in the 1700s. But history tells us that Edwards was one of the greatest minds that ever was known to history. All right, so that's basically this. What she shares from the Christian Church, the Disciples of Christ, on page 239 and 240 is very interesting and very helpful. It's a great model of some ethical maxims. Chapter 14 is about starting new works, new missions, and churches. A lot of this is colored by our church experiences down the South as part of our Southern Baptist Convention, and is drawn that way. But a lot of helpful insights about how to start new mission starts and works. Especially, I would draw your attention to page 244 and what he's zeroing in on in that page and sharing about starting new works. Page 248 about business meetings and tithes and offerings are helpful for any church, but also in the context of helping start a new church. And if your church is led someday to birth a new church, this is important, what he shares there. Then chapter 15, I thought the closing church covenant from the church in Nashville was very good. Chapter 15, cooperative relationships, is talking about our denominational partnering together as churches, associations, state conventions, and national bodies. So the fact that through this cooperative effort we have the opportunity for having resources through one another's, our partnership and relationships and sharings of strengths one to another, and then our joint again efforts to pool our monies to help further the gospel through our churches in starting more churches, and doing that in the association as well across the nation through our CP cooperative program gifts. So we have our associational missions gifts, our cooperative program missions gifts that are sent to the state convention, local association to the associational office, and then the CP goes and is distributed out to the International Mission Board, North American Mission Board, the 7 seminaries, and then to other entities for Great Commission causes and work. So he goes into some different details, and it was especially challenging to me personally as an associational missionary to read this and to realize we are definitely in a changing experience denominationally because of our culture and the internet. There's so much other networkings, but still I think there is great validity to the local associating together, as well as our national and international associating together as a denomination of churches. But yeah, you can't have a virtual marriage, and it's still good to get together physically and eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart, and be challenged, encouraged, and inspired by one another, and helped together in that relationship of partnering. Interesting what Sullivan says in those closing paragraphs of this chapter. He was quite a leader in our denomination's history, but his take on why to cooperate. Well, thanks so much. We're almost to the end of the book. It's got a lot of helpful insights and principles and wisdom to capitalize upon. So thanks for digging in, guys. God bless y'all. Have a great week ahead. Bye.